This conversation is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History, a project of the Michigan Political History Society. I'm Bob LeBrant, a past president of the Michigan Political History Society, and I'm here today to talk to Richard McLellan. Richard, since 1960, has been an active participant on the Michigan political scene. Richard, why don't we start out and just give us a little bit of biographical data as far as when you were born and a little bit about your folks.
Well, I'm about to be 72, so I was born in 1942. When I was 2, my mother took her newborn baby, my brother, and my older brother, and we went to Hawaii on a troop ship. We were one of the first groups of civilians to go back to Hawaii during the war. So I mentioned that I was in Hawaii during the war, and people say, "What war?" these days. So I lived in Illinois, Hawaii, came back to Indiana, moved to Mexico for about 6 months, 4 months, I guess. And then we went to Westfield, New York, and finally to Michigan. My father worked in the food industry, and so he would travel around a lot. So I lived in 11 houses by the time I was in 5th grade. But we settled in Paw Paw, Michigan, and I went 5th grade through high school in Paw Paw, where I really started being more politically active, I guess you would say, or active in policy issues, and then went to Michigan State on a journalism scholarship paid for by the Kalamazoo Gazette all 4 years.
Now, how did you get that scholarship?
I was active. I was editor of the yearbook and the school newspaper, and I had a very good journalism teacher that really mentored me and got me involved in writing and reporting, and I thought I was going to become a reporter.
Now, I also understand that you had an offer to go to the University of Michigan.
I did. I had a Regents scholarship too, but I forgot to accept it, and I thought I could just decide the last week which one I was going to. I didn't quite realize the significance of that. So I ended up with 2 scholarships, one from the Kalamazoo Gazette and one from Michigan State. So that's how I was able to pay for room and board as well as the tuition.
So you initially went to Michigan State to be a journalism major.
Right. I was a journalism major for about a year, and then I didn't think that was sophisticated enough, and I moved to communication science till they told me I had to do statistics, and I said, no, I do words. I don't do numbers. So I was embarrassed to go back to journalism, and I went into advertising, where my advisor put me in honors college where I could take anything I wanted, and the theory being that you will take more advanced courses, I simply took anything that started after 10 and before 3. So I took a lot of interesting courses like canoeing, communism, history of the Caribbean islands. I mean, 3 that come to mind. I always think of those as and of course I had no practical skill when I graduated then with an advertising degree and no advertising courses, and law school was the only choice, and I went to the University of Michigan Law School.
At Michigan State University, you met Peter McPherson, and he recruited you into the Young Republicans. Is that right?
About 1960, I remember. Peter was a year or 2 older than me, and so he got me involved, and then quickly got me involved in the Romney Volunteers, chairman of the Romney Volunteers for MSU. I think he saw me as somebody that they could, use for political kinds of activities. And
so what sort of things would you do in that 62 campaign?
We would go to I remember I had lunch with George Romney at the Michigan State game. It was a campaign event, and so I thought I was going to have a nice lunch with him at the Union, and it was about 8 minutes that Romney was there, and they took the pictures and he was off, but I did have lunch with George Romney that time, and we did the usual campaign things. The other thing to show what a geek I was, the next year I was chairman of Students for CONCON when we had to adopt the new Constitutional Convention. Now, I will say that it was kind of hard to recruit for something like the Constitutional Convention among your average beer-drinking college student, but we helped turn out votes for that, and I got involved in the Ingham County Republican operation at that same time. So I pretty much have been involved with Republican Party politics ever since. I went to every national convention from 1960 on.
So you went to Chicago in 1960?
Yeah, I went to 60. I went to San Francisco in 64, Miami in 68, 72. I missed the one where Gerald Ford was nominated because I couldn't afford it. And then I've continued to go, sometimes with Governor Engler or then Senator Engler. And so I've always been active politically.
Back, just back on that April vote in 1963 that adopted the Michigan Constitution by a very narrow margin. I think it was only about 7,500 votes, and there was a statewide recount. But at least your career, your analysis of the Michigan Constitution has probably been, one of the major areas of your law practice, hasn't it?
Yeah, I got a job working for then Lieutenant Governor McLellan in 65, and the new Constitution was being implemented, and he asked me to do a study of all the executive branch agencies during the summer, that he wanted to write a book on the new structure of state government. So I had an opportunity to learn a lot of what's in the Constitution, but more importantly, what was in the Executive Organization Act that created the structure of government. And that's paid off for years because I actually know the history of how these departments came into force and used it in my practice and used it with governors, and particularly the governor's powers to reorganize, were something that I learned on my own back then, working for the lieutenant governor. And then when he became governor, I was on his staff, and I did a memo on the governor's powers under reorganization, which Governor Blanchard used. And then when Governor Engler was elected, a Blanchard official brought me that same memo that they had found in the archives. So sometimes what you do has a fairly long life, and that's what makes public policy interesting.
Let's go back to college. Probably one of your first patronage jobs was to be a janitor at the state capitol.
Janitor jobs were a political plum back then. We made $100 a week, which would be the equivalent of more than $600 a week now. They were generally given to the sons of the Speaker of the House or some powerful Democrat or Republican leader, but through a series of incidents, a good friend of mine got fired because Peter McPherson was a janitor in the Senate and basically was subcontracted to help do this House janitor's job, got caught. My friend got fired, Peter got sent back to the Senate, and I got the job because we all hung around together. So that's how I could first afford a car and help pay for those last years of school. And so that was my first job in the state capitol, as I frequently tell legislators that I was there. And then I eventually went on the lieutenant governor's staff, and then I went on the governor's staff. And so 3 different times I've been in the Capitol, starting with my very own mop bucket in a closet. Later on became the ladies' restroom. There was no women's restroom for legislators when I started.
I understand that when you were a janitor, you used the opportunity to arrange a meeting with Governor Romney about involving student leaders in Michigan politics.
Well, this was later on when I was in law school. A number of us were Republicans, and we recognized that the kind of people that joined the Republican Party, the students, were not the same as the student government types. And we felt that there was a lot of potential leaders there and we should reach out to them. So I called up and went up and saw the governor. And I said, we had this idea, we want to have this statewide conference of student leaders for the Republican Party, and make it work, he would have to come and sponsor it, and he did, and he brought the lieutenant governor, and that was a very interesting project, and it did sort of begin to give me the contacts I needed, and then gave me the contact the next summer where I got a job with the lieutenant governor. So that meeting with Governor Romney, had some consequences for a long time since I.
So that led then to a meeting with Bill Milliken And you had a job with Bill Milliken, during the summer as a driver?
65 and 66. During 65 was not the campaign year, and then 66 I was the driver. And it was the campaign year, and I was supposed to go back to law school in August, and John Stalin, former Senator Stalin, was going to take over. Well, Stalin was sort of the governor's bagman and very good friend and a former senator, but he decided that he was going to go to Europe or something, and all of a sudden I had to continue to drive really through the campaign. So I didn't go to law school very much.